The air conditioning, video number 3 on this Honda. You have to look back to the first video for the pressures and temperatures. So now we're full. Before we had 210 grams. We were cooling fine out of the dash, but the factory spec is 500 to 550. But look at the difference of the suction line. So I can get it out here. 38 degrees. Before it was 64 degrees. Now the compressor temperature, 146, I think it was 154, but now it's full, and that is the temperature of the discharge line. I'm not using this sensor, so I could swap it back and show you the difference. So now I'm getting a cool mist of oil and refrigerant back to the compressor, but it was working just perfectly with only 210 grams. But now it's 30 minutes later and the sun has come up, and if you notice the shadow in the old video, the shadow was somewhere over here and there was not a strong heat load on the dash. Now I have the full force of the sun. It's now 68 degrees instead of 62 degrees. The dash is now getting heated up, trying to heat up the inside of the car. So now we got one mother of a load on there. But look at what do we got here? We got nice, beautiful condensation, something we didn't have before. If you look down there, we have condensation on the line all the way down by the compressor. You can see the drops of water, and you can see here's the hot fan. We have like 160 degree air blowing on that line. You can actually see the water drops moving in the hot air. That line is so cold at that point, even with 140, 170 degree air blowing over it, it's still able to produce water. That is the difference between a system that is not full and a system that is full. And let me take the temperature sensor off of the compressor discharge. So now we're coming off of the compressor discharge. This is the one I had hooked up before. Let me move it out of its place. And now let me put this so we could read. Now this is the liquid line coming out of the condenser. We were at 146. Now we got to wait for the temperature of that line to go down. 98 degrees is the liquid line coming out of the condenser. I believe when we were low on charge, we only had 210 grams of refrigerant. Our discharge line was 102 degrees. Now this supposedly doesn't make sense, because look at, we're now 30 plus minutes later. Our ambient temperature raised from 62 degrees to 68 degrees. Before we did not have a sun load going through the dash, heating up the dash and the seats, and now we do. It should be the opposite, shouldn't it? Everything should be higher and hotter. But remember, superheat. Look at our superheat now. 18 degrees of superheat. Look at our suction line temperature now. Before we had 210 grams. Now we're operating at 550 grams. Look at our high side pressure. Look at our low side pressure. Everything has changed. But yet we have more refrigerant, but numbers went down. Why is that? I'm pointing my finger back at the armchair engineers and the YouTube professors who keep telling you to charge by pressures and temperatures. Let's see. This is the air temperature. If I was taking in the air through the corral, I don't have my thermometer stuck all the way down in the mixed air of the system. I'm taking out too much time right now just to make this video. Turn on my little laptop, get out some extra sensors and go over this. I'm kind of backed up today. But I really had to make this point, because this is another one where the refrigerant charge was low, but pressures and temperatures were higher. Pressures weren't too much. The temperature out of the compressor definitely was higher. Our suction line temperature was higher, but yet it was cooling out the dash with 210 grams of refrigerant. Now we're still cooling with 550 grams of refrigerant, but yet our liquid line temperature went down. with more sun load, higher ambient temperature, and 550 grams instead of 210 grams. Are you starting to see a pattern when you try to charge by pressures and temperatures? It all depends on your ambient. And if it was any hotter out now, and I have to make a video using the remote sensors so I could show you the difference when you turn it between recycle and fresh air. When you turn it on fresh air, you're taking in the air temperature here. Now, if it was 90 degrees or 100 degrees and I was in Arizona, and especially on some cars, the air temperature under the hood could easily be approaching 190 degrees, 180 degrees, and you would be taking that air right off here that's being pushed by a fan. You have the hot exhaust manifold, and it sucks the air up, and it goes right down the fresh air port, right to your evaporator, giving you false high pressures, and the low pressure would be higher, because if you're taking the outside air, you're not taking the outside air. You're taking engine radiator temperature air. You're taking exhaust manifold air and sucking it right into the air. So I put my remote sensors, or you run your hoses from under the engine and you close the hood. Then you take your pressures and temperatures. When you're doing fresh air on a hot day with a fan blowing and exhaust manifold just below your fresh air intake, and if you're trying to load it up using that air, you will get totally wrong numbers. And this is what 99% of the shops do. When they're told to load it up, they load it up, and if they take fresh air on a hot day, we don't live anywhere where it's 170 degrees outside. So you're taking a false reading, so you get false information. So I'll let it sit at that. Look at video number 1, pressures and temperatures at 210 grams. Now we're at 550 grams, and compare the pressures and temperatures before. We're now getting a nice, moist, cool, well lubricated spray of refrigerant and oil aerosol spraying back down into the compressor, cooling off the compressor. We're condensating beautifully off all the lines, all the way down to the compressor. So if you want to listen to the guy say, if your AC works fine, you never have to service it until it stops working, then you'll be in one of these shops having your compressor changed, your condenser changed, your expansion valve changed, all the refrigerant lines flushed out, because either you listen to the guy who says you don't have to fill it up until it doesn't work, or the other guys who go down and get the AC Pro and dump all that solid liquid, other additive crap into the system, and then overcharge it with liquid, and that's a whole nother ball of wax and a different kind of failure and problem. See you on the next video. This was video number 3. Go back to video number 1, go back to video number 2, and see the steps and procedures. I left a lot of information out. I've only given you little tiny tidbits. Next, see you. Bye.